to Power of the Tribe podcast. I'm your host, John Connors. I'm also the founder and head instructor of Connors Martial Arts in Norwood, Mass. We teach Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Muay Thai kickboxing, and mixed martial arts. Reach out to us, send us a message, give us a call, come down and see us, and we'll help make your life better. How's that sound, Dan? Make your life better?
Sounds good.
And I'm here with my co-host, Dan Robin. How you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Okay. I'm not even going to ask you for a number.
I'm fine.
Good. Good.
How are you?
Oh, thank you for asking. Well, my Oura ring said I was 77% recovered or whatever the hell it says. So I guess
that's pretty high.
Yeah. I'm going to say that converts to a 7.7 on the Dan Robin scale.
So that's pretty good.
I think that's pretty good. And I think this dopey Oura ring is helping me sleep better.
And so you no longer even know how you feel. You just have to read the ring. Like,
I have no idea how I'm feeling.
Like, oh, wait, you read the number and go, wait, turns out I feel like crap today. I didn't even realize.
Then it says my readiness is a 77.
That
Still going
good.
strong. My eyes aren't, though. Okay, so last night's sleep wasn't the best, but your readiness is still good. I don't know why that would be, but you're on track to perform well today.
Oh, good.
And then I also I love these gadgets. I tested my heart rate variability. We talked about that.
Yeah.
So guess what my heart rate variability was today?
Low.
Actually, it was a 9.
Nice.
So you're
So
a probability guy. You know this is all bullshit.
It's
anyways,
all
right?
coming together for you today.
It says I
It's
had
gonna be
5
big for
hours
you.
and 57 minutes of sleep.
Is that right?
I think they're counting like being out.
Right.
You know, I was in bed for 8.5 hours, something like that. 8.25, 8.5 hours. I got almost 6 hours of sleep out of that.
So that would mean you were awake in bed for 2.5 hours.
Or 2 hours.
That's a long time. Is that normal for you?
Well, I did get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. So, I don't know. I don't know. And then I don't jump out of bed in the morning.
All right, gotcha.
Do you jump out of bed? I kind of lay there and
I usually have to get
rest.
up. I'm like getting the kids ready.
Oh,
doing
right.
Something.
I don't have
the
to
dog
do
out.
any of that nonsense. Thank
Yeah,
God.
I've got one of those things. I've got some reason to get up usually.
So that's
I get up. I wake right up. I'm not one of those groggy, staggering around, need my cup of coffee people. When I wake up, I'm awake.
Do you drink coffee?
No.
Huh.
And I'm like one of the only people left. I'm hanging. I think I might have told you. I might have brought it up. I tried to get addicted to coffee.
You tried to.
I couldn't.
Huh.
I seem to have a problem. I don't know if it's diagnosable, but I have a lot of trouble getting addicted to things.
Huh.
I tried to get, so it was when I started working, I was like, I'll be a coffee addict. I'm in.
When you were working an office job.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, I'm in, it's a lot. And I had a baby at home. I was like, I'm exhausted all the time. So I tried, but I just, I'd buy coffee 3 days in a row and then I'd forget for a week. I'd fall right off the wagon and I'd be like, I forgot my coffee addiction. I just couldn't get addicted. And then I'd forget. Then it would be 2 weeks. Next thing I knew, I was like, I hadn't had coffee in 3 weeks.
I'm fairly addicted to it. I like it. I think a couple years ago, I tried to go cold turkey, and for 3 days, I didn't even remember my name.
You get like headaches. And
I didn't get headaches so much, but it was like my mind was in sludge. I couldn't think clearly.
I know. Almost everyone I know is a coffee addict. So I always hear this where someone says, I say I don't drink coffee, and they're like, oh, if I didn't have coffee, I'd feel horrible. I'd feel exhausted and terrible all day. And I always tell them, yeah, no, I feel horrible. I feel exhausted. I feel exhausted and horrible all day.
Oh, yeah,
that's not different. Yeah, I've got that part of it. I just can't get addicted to the coffee. Maybe I'll try it again.
I love it, but I think if you get off of it, you just have to go through probably a week or two of withdrawals to reacclimate yourself to not having the caffeine.
Right.
It's a little controversial. There's all these different takes on it, that it's healthy for you, that it's not healthy for you. I suppose like anything, it's how much you do of it, right? If you overdo it, it's not going to be good.
I got to go through so remember earlier in the podcast, it was like each month
you were doing something, right?
Yeah, it would be like, I'm not going to eat
You did
sugar,
a sober.
no,
What did
sober
you,
January.
Sober January?
No sugar in February.
right?
And then it was like small portion March or something like this. I don't remember now.
Where are you now?
No, it's like the opposite on all of them. It's like total, like I don't know.
You're
like,
doing hedonistic
yeah,
July.
hedonistic. It's like Caligula July. Like I'm just without the orgies. I'm just sort of like eating whatever I want. I'm like not working out. Haven't even been to the gym. It's just like complete sloth.
Decadence.
Slovenly July.
Hmm.
So it's not like, by the way, it wasn't planned. It's just turned out that way. So
Well,
I
we were
gotta
talking
get
about
back
this before the podcast. You know, you just went on a beautiful trip with your whole family, right?
yes, to London.
To London. And I was following you on Facebook, and life is good.
Yeah.
I don't want to jinx you by talking about it on the podcast, but
What's good, the thing is, so I had a moment for this trip where, and maybe anyone that goes to like Europe, especially with your family, has this moment where I'm like, why do I even, especially right before you go, it's sort of like, why do I even do this? Like,
why do you even do what?
like travel.
Okay.
Because travel, everyone I know says their favorite thing. If you ask everyone what's their favorite thing, top 2 or 3 is going to be travel. You know?
Do you think women feel more strongly about that than men? I notice on the dating sites, every woman is like travel is the most important, amazing thing for them, and they actually are proud of where they've gone. It's like an accomplishment for them.
I think, well, there's 2 things. One is it's sort of a filter. It means they want someone who can afford to let them travel.
So it's like a
right?
financial
Yeah.
filter.
Even if they're doing
Right.
it by mistake, it's like if you can't afford to travel, then we're not going to be.
You're out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Secondly, I sort of get it in that I don't think it's that appealing if someone's like, I hate to travel. Like, it doesn't have a good sound to it. It's like, you know, if you're like, well, how do you feel about meeting new people and experiencing new cultures? And you're like, I don't want to do any of that. You know, it doesn't sound.
That'd be too
sound
closed
good.
of
Yeah,
a person, right?
It sounds a little closed.
Yeah,
to be
you want a
like,
little bit of an openness
yeah,
with
it's like,
somebody.
I like my own town and people that are like me. And, you know, like, it just doesn't sound that good. So I think for
Right.
that reason, they say it's good.
Makes sense.
But people also forget with travel. So I think every vacation, I think there's almost part of the brain that makes you forget bad things that have happened to you, or like discomfort. Like
Discomfort in a traveling experience.
I think
yeah.
almost any experience. Like I used
Right.
to say about, so, you know, I talked before, I've climbed, you know, however many hundreds of mountains.
Yep.
I feel like to this day, I'll still be on one and be like, oh yeah, this sucks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like I can't quite retain it.
Right.
It's not like I've literally forgotten, but like I'll still be on a mountain and go, I forgot how bad this sucks.
Why was this a good idea?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I had the same feeling for travel, so past vacations too. I'll be like, oh, that was awesome when we, you know, we went to the top of that mountain and we saw that view. That was a great day.
Right.
And then someone will be like my wife might be like, didn't you have like an infected tooth, infected sinus that day? And it was like your head was killing you. And I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't a great day. You know what I mean? Like, you forget. How many of your old vacations do you remember? Oh, I was really sick, or I had a headache, or I was jet lagged, or
I don't remember too much of that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think you just kind of don't remember the bad parts of it, or like I was kept awake. I couldn't sleep.
Well, you probably remember the more unique aspects that they're going to have a bigger impact on your memory, and something like a sinus infection is so like pedestrian every day that you don't remember it as much unless it was really painful, right?
So it fades away. So even on a maybe even lighter, like even less important note, but we woke up to go to London on, you know, flying with 5 people, and when I woke up overnight, there had been a text that said your flight's been delayed a day.
A day. That's a big delay.
Yeah, like you have plans, like you have, you know.
So a text rolled in at like 3 a.m. or something?
Yeah, it was like 1 in the morning.
1 in the morning.
Yeah.
Huh.
So I wake up and I look at it and I'm like,
what time do you wake up?
I don't, you know, like 6:30.
When was the flight? Like noon time?
No, it was actually like later that night.
Later that night.
So say it was like a 10 p.m. flight.
Less than 24-hour notice
that
it's going to be pushed back a day.
The other thing though is like 10 p.m. and it, like they knew, so it's like almost 24 hours ahead of time, and you can't get a plane.
Oh,
like,
you can't figure it
get
out.
any sort of plane there. But anyway, So I'm like, oh, here we go. You know what I mean? Like, here we go. And then, so the first thing I call the airline, and they're like, there's actually a flight scheduled to leave in half an hour, but we know that one's delayed like 15 hours. Like, and they're like, that's not leaving. It's supposed to go out at 7:30 a.m., but that's not going to leave till 11 o'clock tonight. And there's seats. So I'm like, oh, fine, put me on there. And they're like, we can't because it's scheduled to leave in half an hour and it locks us out. Like, and I'm like, and there's nothing that anyone can do. You know what I mean? Like, this kind of madness.
Seems like there's a flaw in the system there, yeah.
Everyone knows that's not leaving for 15 hours.
Huh.
And we cannot get seats on that flight. And so this is the kind of thing that drives you crazy. Like, so then I had to fly.
Like when they give you an infant boarding pass and they said it'll be perfectly fine.
Exactly. But these are the kind of things that happen whenever you travel, right? Like, it's pretty common. Like, like no one had any sympathy. I didn't get there and they're like, oh, wow, that happened. They're all like, yeah, I had my own. Everyone had their own story. Or like a lot of the people came in for this wedding from Russia and they're like, is that supposed to be bad? Like, we were held up. I only got permission to leave the country 2 days ago. And, so
you're at a wedding.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
For some of it.
Yeah.
And so I had to fly to Charlotte and then to London. But even there, I'm not sure how your geography is. I think most people don't totally realize this, but like the East Coast.
Not going in the right direction there.
The East Coast of the U.S. too goes very far west. Like, do you know what I mean? Like
the East Coast.
Like, if you follow down the East Coast, you don't go straight down Boston.
You're going
like
kind
Georgia.
of southwest.
Yeah. Like, I didn't even realize how much. But if you think about it, like, New York is almost as far west from Boston as it is south. And I always picture dropping down.
Yeah.
But really, you're driving west. Everything's west.
So Boston is closer to London than practically any other place on the East Coast.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I flew to Charlotte, I forgot, it's a sizable flight, 2.5 hours, something like that. You land, you wait, you get back on the plane, and then they show the flight path, and it's like, in 2.5 hours, we'll be passing Boston. And it's
you fly back over Boston.
Yeah, like the line, they show a line of the flight path, and it's like right over Boston. And that'll be about 7 hours into my trip. Like, literally, or more. It was about 8 hours into the trip, I'll be passing Boston. So it's maddening.
That's maddening.
It's maddening. And so that moment, I'm sitting there, I'm like, why? I'm not even going to do this. And like, I'm not going to travel.
Is it.
Like,
I'm out.
I'm out for travel. But it all passes, So it's sort of like, and I think it relates to something that we keep talking about on the podcast, which is like, so and I know it sounds like stretching it, but I don't think it's as stretching it as it might initially sound, which is, you can't just keep avoiding discomfort in the same way. Like, you can't, like, you can say like, this travel's a hassle, I'm out, I'm not doing it. But then what do? Like, you just don't go anywhere, and you don't, you know what I mean? Like,
that's pretty boring.
Everything's a hassle, right? Like, driving far is a hassle, going places a hassle. Like, and there is a temptation, and I think some people give into it, which is, I'm just not going to do it. And it applies to going to this gym, right? Like, and it applies to going to any gym, or pursuing anything where you're like, hassles build up, and I think some people react, and I think we all have an instinct to react of like, I don't need this hassle anymore.
Yeah. I think some people would say we're always doing a cost-benefit analysis, and we're trying to compare the cost of doing something with the expected benefit. And if the benefit isn't enough, then we're out.
Right. But it can be hard too to, like, something like going to a jiu-jitsu gym, weighing that benefit is it's hard, right?
I think it's very hard, and it's very individual. Everyone's going to have a different way to measure it.
Right. And then I think that's partly what you, as a gym owner, try to talk to people, like, what is that benefit? Because I think I have friends this way, and I would actually think it's the vast majority of people are like, they don't see the benefit, and they're like, why? I'm not a fighter. Why would I
agree.
Go to a gym like that? And
I
they just don't see it. They're like, I have trouble enough getting on a treadmill, and it's like, they don't see it. Yeah. And it's very hard to explain or convince anyone that there's a benefit above and beyond. And because you hear it, like, you just sent around an article. It was Russell Brand. Yep. He's a huge fan, and Jonah Hill, some of these celebrities. And you always hear the same tone.
Did you see the Jonah Hill article?
I-
I just posted it kind of blindly. I didn't look at it, and there was a couple of videos in it. And Anthony Twining, one of the guys who trains with us, he's a Boston police officer. He goes, I learned two things about Jonah Hill. He drinks the same like pre-workout drink that I do, and he parks in handicap spots. So the video shows him his like SUV or something is clearly in a handicap spot.
And it wasn't part of the story. It was just
No,
not, yeah.
yeah,
It's
like
supposed-
I didn't
supposed
notice
to be
it,
a
but
positive story.
But I
yeah.
guess if you're in
Yeah.
law enforcement, you'd see the sign and the markings.
Yeah.
So that schlub is like just casually parking in handicap spots, and he's like walking to the academy, and he drops his belt. He's got like a white belt with one stripe on it. He looks so disheveled and slovenly.
I always had a bad opinion of him because I remember he got his fame and he like used it in his own words, his own interview. He was like, it's basically like now I go back and mock all the people from high school. And I'm like, really? Like
That's very
and he
noble
was like
of you.
in his 20s, he's like, and I slept with some of the girls that wouldn't have had me back then, and this kind of stuff. Where I'm like, oh, that's great. It's great use of your fame. But he was also young, like he might be getting older and maybe learning some lessons.
How old is he now, do you think?
30.
Got to be 30, right?
Yeah.
I hope he stops parking in
But
handicap spots.
I know. Use the same tone though all the time. These guys are like, wow, like it's really, like it's that same surprise almost of like it really helped me and benefited me in ways I didn't realize it was going to. And the same feeling that I had starting, where you're like, you want to tell people, and it's very hard. Like
You want
know
to
what I mean?
evangelize, but if people
Yeah.
don't want to hear it.
So I might have told that. I don't remember if I said this on an early podcast, but I think it's common too. You start, and then I started telling everyone, like, oh, this is amazing, this is awesome, and all these guys would be like, either they were in karate or something, and they're like, oh, that sounds cool, or they weren't, and they were still thought, it sounded cool, and one by one, I realized nobody was going to do it. Nobody was going to start.
Yeah, it's tricky.
So it's hard to explain to people why they'd want. And then those are the people that even listen to me. Other people would outright be like, why would
Dan,
I want to do
did I tell you
that?
my Starbucks stories? This happened, I would say 6 to 10 years ago. Maybe 10 years ago. I used to go in this one little Starbucks in Brookline, on Putterham Circle. And coincidentally, this happened 6 times, I think, in the same Starbucks. The barista, the person behind the cash register, sees my shirt or something, and they go, oh, jiu-jitsu. I've always wanted to do that. And they insist that I give them a business card or get them a schedule or something. And they're so excited. And they're like, okay, I'm going to come in Tuesday night. And I'm like, great. I'm not
Right.
proselytizing. I'm not out there selling. I'm just like, sure, okay. And, of course, they don't show up. And then I roll in for my coffee. And they're behind the cash register. And the first time they have some excuse, but I will be there next Tuesday.
Right.
And they never showed
Eventually,
up.
they just don't even say that anymore. They're like,
I had one guy a lot of them I could tell they really weren't cut out for it. But one guy was this young, relatively fit-looking Brazilian guy. And then he got so ashamed, I would come in the store and I would see him. He would grab the mop and run in the back room holding the mop, hiding behind this mop or something. He was so embarrassed that he couldn't face me.
yeah. And I think, I had the same. I gave up completely. It's been probably 10 years since I tried to convince anyone to do it.
Well, I think the other thing is you have some people who are in a different camp where they're doing some non-live martial art, and they're very satisfied with their experience. It's scratching whatever itch they had. And
maybe that's fair enough then.
I think
Maybe
it's
just
fair
keep
enough,
doing
but
that.
I don't like when they rationalize it. Like what we do is so dangerous
Oh, yeah.
that those poor jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai kickboxing guys would just get killed.
So do people still say that?
They
I feel-
absolutely do.
Because
They
to me,
absolutely do.
I've been in this world long enough that I'm like, is that gone? But then sometimes I think it's just because I'm not seeing
They
that
absolutely
anymore.
do. And they say, well, that wouldn't really work on the street because it's a sport. And I even saw a video yesterday. Some guy was some street guy, and he has his student, his uke, wearing like a helmet with a mask, and he's wearing like kind of MMA gloves, and he's doing his like pap, pap, pap
Yeah.
stuff. I'm like, well, why don't you just do MMA or kickboxing? Like I thought this was too sport-like to put pads on ourselves and do this.
Right.
And he wasn't really even hitting the guy. It still wasn't live training. So Yeah, there's still people out there doing that, and it's
And
nonsense.
then it's delusional because they don't test themselves, right? I
They
always
don't
thought
test
that,
themselves.
and goes back to like the second episode of the podcast. I think one of the filters for the people that go into a live training gym, whether it's boxing or MMA or jiu-jitsu or wrestling, or if I'm leaving one out,
Right.
but probably leaving a few out, but
Yeah.
Muay Thai, it's that people want to test themselves. They want to at least be like, is this real? They don't want to live in a fantasy, and they want to really
I think you're right. Yeah.
see. And it turned out that was a huge filter, because I think I said it on the second podcast, where every guy in my old karate gym talked the same way as me. They all said, I wonder if this will work. My number one concern is, will this work or not? And
So
then I
they
was like,
wondered it, Dan,
Yeah.
but they really didn't want to find out, right?
yeah, that's what I eventually
Yeah.
found out. But I didn't know that. I thought we were all on the same page.
Right.
And then I went and found out and was like, hey, guys, there's ways to find out, basically. And what I was saying is, guess what? It doesn't work. You
Yeah.
know? And but you can learn something that does.
Yeah.
And I was so excited about it in those early days. And I really was, my first shock was learning that no one would. I was like, maybe one or two of these guys won't want to switch over. And I realized
None
it
of
would
them
be
wanted
none,
it.
Zero. No one came over.
They're very comfortable living in their delusion.
Yeah.
Which is human nature,
Sometimes
I guess.
it's okay
common, right?
And some people, it's fine too. We've always said this.
I
We're
think
not
it
as
is fine.
harsh as it sometimes sounds like. If some people don't want to do it, they don't have to do it. You're happy doing your thing, do it.
They
But
don't. I think they would probably be better served to be a little tempered in reality and say, yeah, I do this. It's better than nothing. You know what I mean? If they had that take on it.
Right.
Like,
or they just said, look, I like it. I
I
wanna
like it.
I
Yeah.
like it. I've spent a lot of years doing it, and I want to keep doing it. That's
Right.
fair enough. I think, like you said, you get annoyed when they start talking in delusional or ridiculous ways about.
Right. When they're completely unrealistic, where they're saying sport fighting is useless or counterproductive, and what we're doing is the only and the best way to do it. Yeah,
Right.
that's a little silly. Yeah. It's so funny. I was thinking of a topic today, Dan, about violence. And first I want to start with this phrase, naturalistic fallacy. Are you familiar with that phrase?
I am not.
So what it means is, just because something is sort of natural, like this is what people naturally do, this is what we've evolved to do, it doesn't necessarily mean it's moral or ethical or good. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of scientists get in trouble when they go to explain something. Oh, yeah, we've evolved to do this, and people jump all over him. Like, so you're justifying that behavior. That's awful. You're a terrible person. He's like, no, I'm not justifying the behavior. I'm just saying this is what we've evolved to do. This is natural, but it's not necessarily good. And some
Right.
people have problem getting, sorting out that difference. So naturalistic fallacy, the fallacy is to think just because it's natural, it's good or ethical.
Right. So can I run two possible examples just in the way of like,
Hit me.
is this an example of naturalistic fallacy? So one is, I've just been watching these nature shows lately, like Blue Planet and whatever, all those other David Attenborough ones that
Yeah.
are out there on Netflix. They're awesome. They're really fun
very
to watch.
good.
But the one thing you always learn again is that nature's horribly cruel.
It's merciless.
Horribly
ruthless.
merciless.
Yeah.
Is one thing, and like
You just
it's
have to own a fish tank, and you know
yeah,
that.
exactly. It's almost like what I was starting to think is humans are all. I mean, you have some examples of it, but it's almost a weird thing that humans have to care at all. Like in nature, people, none of them care. You know what I mean? It's not like you don't have, lions being like, oh, is that baby antelope is sick? Like, do you know what I mean? Like they don't
Yeah.
care.
Right.
And not just like zebras aren't like, oh, that baby antelope is sick. They don't care.
They don't
And
even care.
often the other antelopes don't even care. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's sort of like our
So,
caring.
yeah,
is
the
almost
bear,
like-
mother bear will sometimes eat their young if under certain conditions.
right,
yeah.
right. So it's sort of like the idea of something being natural. Like nature's very cruel, very unkind,
Mm.
and so it sometimes gets put as or very callous at least.
Right.
And or just the general thing. It was just a Blue Planet where it was like polar bear has cubs she's got to feed, and the walrus has babies, the polar bear's trying to eat, and they both care deeply about their young,
Right.
but one's gonna die, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and it's almost a mechanistic caring. They just want to get their genes to the next generation, right? It's not like
yeah, but well, sort of, because you can go too far. Like, it sort of isn't that the only reason we care about our kids too? Is
the only reason why I cared.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes people say.
So the fallacy would be, if you told me that thing where, what was the exact? Oh, that they don't care. And I would say, so you think that's right? So usually, I think naturalistic fallacy only occurs when describing human behavior, because we usually don't attribute morals or ethics to animals, right?
So you're saying the fallacy is only when you add that moral component, like, which is
it's because some explanation, some sort of judgment of good or bad. Like, they do this, so you're saying that's good. Right. And that's the fallacy, is if somebody assumes you're old, just by explaining it naturally, you're implying that it's good or ethical or moral.
So let me give you this example, which is not moral, but at least you'll see what I mean. It's because it's a big thing when you have dogs. There's a madhouse contingent out there about what you feed your dog. People are just like insane. They like
some faction have strong feelings
happily kill you if you're feeding them like bad dog food, like, you know what I mean, like, just madhouse.
What do they feed them?
Well, that's the other thing.
Specialized food?
Most of them hate each other because they're all wrong. You know, they're all like, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. But it's generally like, you know, raw food, raw
meat.
Raw meat kind of stuff.
Don't dogs, they exclusively eat meat?
Yes, but it's like kibble has other stuff in it.
Right.
But, you know, and it's just a mess. I'm not that interested in going in the exact topic, but the thing that I noticed is that one of the big things is, like, especially marketing, they're like, this is what a wolf would eat, or this is what a dog in the wild would eat. And,
that would appeal to me. I'd be like, all right, we gotta get that. Yeah.
Right. And with humans too, right? Where you say, you know, like, and it seems to be largely correct, like, this is what a caveman would eat. This is what in paleo times. But it's like, the side out. So back to we'll keep it to the dogs for now, where it's like, but dogs in the wild live like 3 years. Like, wolves live like 4 years.
Do they?
You know what I mean? Like, like, it's rough out there, like you said. So the idea is like, well, this is what wolves eat, and it's like, the average wolf is dead by 5. Like, your dog's living
clogged arteries.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's getting eaten by some other
creature.
sedentary.
Spends too much time reading. But like they so I'm always like, just because they do it in the wild is not necessarily proof of anything. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
it's not necessarily mean it's good.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not moral. That's just
But that's a judgment of good or bad.
Right.
So that would fall under naturalistic
And I think
fallacy.
paleo diet is basically on the right track from everything I've seen, but just in the fact that, like, cavemen ate this, so it must be good, is not quite right. Like, it's sort of,
I think
like,
it's probably not optimal.
Cavemen probably lived to 21, right? And so, just.
But I think it's clear that processed food, for the most part, is very unhealthy.
Right, but so it's sort of not the greatest example, because I think it happens in that case to mostly be true.
Yeah.
But the logic that it's naturalistic is proof is still not right.
Right. Like, they used to eat termites probably. I don't feel like eating termites. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, or their own, you know, like, they couldn't they'd eat their own vomit because they couldn't waste the food or something. Like, that doesn't mean that we're all
Dan, you might be onto something. The vomit diet. Yeah. Vomit your way to 6-pack abs. Yeah.
So you see what I'm saying? Like, the idea that, you know, and like, they probably didn't cook, at least some of them didn't cook their food, right? And, like, that doesn't mean that you.
I think when you look at the naturalistic ways, it probably starts you on the right track of where you want to go. But you're right. It's probably not precisely correct.
Yeah, they just stayed away from sugar and processed food and processed.
You didn't have it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it might not be just because it was natural.
I agree. I think what I've learned in my years of eating is it's probably somewhat individualistic. So if somebody was asking my advice for eating, I would say start with whole natural food and see how you feel. And for some reason, rice doesn't agree with me. I guess that's natural, but my stomach doesn't feel good, so I just avoid that. I don't know. Cavemen might have ate it. I don't know. And then all these foods are kind of engineered. How old are they? You know, rice probably didn't
Right.
even exist back then, right?
I feel like I could follow this down a path though and be like, I'm at my best with like ring dings and like cheese doodles
And
Be
Jack
like,
Daniels.
Yeah, I'd be like,
Yeah.
Jack Daniels. Exactly. I started with like whole food, you know, like raw meats.
Well, you're not falling for that
raw
naturalistic
meats, and then
fallacy,
be like,
that's for sure.
I'd be like, the chicken didn't agree with me. And then be like,
Okay, so
okay.
we got a little off track, which is unusual for us. But so the naturalistic fallacy that I want to avoid is talking about violence and human nature. So there seems to be a natural tendency under certain conditions for people to be violent, especially men, I would say, right?
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah.
You can buy that. So there's a lot of news lately about protesters, sort of political protesters, and they're being violent. And so we don't talk about politics much on this podcast, and I think it can be very distracting sometimes.
Right.
So if you take politics aside and you just talk about protesters, so somebody's protesting something, and they see somebody who has a different point of view, a different even political point of view, and they physically attack them unprovoked, like they're not protecting themselves from physical violence themselves, and they just hit somebody over the head, throw something at them, kick them, and punch them. That's just wrong. It's just, that's bad. Stop doing that. But I heard somebody talking about this, and I saw some videos, and I started to get, the idea, and this is, just a complete, brainstorming, is I think some of these people are using these protests as a way to sort of it's socially acceptable, at least in their social circle, to express violence. It's like, I'm going to get violent now, and I can kind of get away with it. Like if I hit somebody over the head who was just walking down the street and there was no political context, that would not be cool. And my friends wouldn't like me for doing that, and there'd be legal ramifications. It's not cool. But in this context, I can kind of do it. So I think that's a big part of their motivation, not their political feelings. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But so you're saying there's maybe there's a natural urge toward violence.
There's a natural urge to express violence.
Because then people play with the definitions when you say, because I was thinking of like, how do people, everyone would agree when you say it's not right to, attack an unprovoked, attack someone you're not defending yourself. But then people start going, oh, but they did provoke me with their words, or, they find some way to.
Right, so I'm defining
Right.
physical violence as I strike you with an object, either throwing or holding in my hand, or I punch or kick you. Like my body interacts with your body with acceleration.
Right. But
and
people will find their sort of reason to be like why it's justified. Be like their views are so bad.
Exactly.
And then I think
but
both
my whole
sides
point is,
both sides will feel that about the other side, right? I mean,
but here's my point. My point is what's really driving that behavior is just sort of the vicarious pleasure of expressing violence and getting away with it in a socially acceptable way. It's a little bit like, I don't know if this still happens, Dan. You were just over in England. Remember they had that soccer hooliganism? Does that still exist?
I hear it
With
does,
these
but
guys
I
who
don't
put
really
on
see it.
their team colors, their scarves, and go down the street and just beat the hell out of somebody on the opposing side. And they feel justified by doing it.
I had a conversation where they said, oh, yeah, it's still bad, but it can't be, right? Because we used to see video.
I have no idea.
And there's no video of it now, and videos everywhere, right? Like, literally a stadium will have 50,000 cameras in it, and it would be on the internet if there was bad
You would think
violence,
so,
right?
unless it's somehow become so legitimized that people don't care at all anymore, that it's not even newsworthy. I would think that would be hard to believe.
Right. So I'd say that's
because the media loves violence, right? So they would be playing it.
But that's the other side too. That's sort of the icing on the cake of what you're saying. So you're saying people just like to have a reason to express that violence, like, and have a
They like to have a reason. Right.
I also think we've talked before, and this, not to talk about tribes on this podcast, but like that
Let's
people
not get off topic
right.
and go down the tribe route.
But people like to demonstrate that they're a strong member, that they like to be like, so soccer hooligan likes to be like, I'm such a big fan, I'm attacking the other team, or like, I'm so strong in my politics. I'm going to attack the other team and like show to your peers like I care more than you.
Yeah,
like
so
you
I'm
didn't,
rising
you didn't even
in
hit
the,
anybody.
I'm rising in
you
the
know?
hierarchy of the group.
Yeah,
because I'm
you
more
just
extreme
yelled,
than you. Yeah,
but I hit somebody. It's
Right.
like I even cared more than you about this.
Yep. Here's the other thing I noticed when I watched a few of these videos, Dan. The guys doing the violence, and I think it's mostly men. I think that's an easy generalization to make. They weren't that good at it. So
terribly.
the way they punched and kicked, I was like, they really don't have a lot of experience in violence.
Right.
So that makes me think even more that they're in it more, maybe a little bit more for the violence than the politics.
Right.
And to bring this back around to what we're about, I think that's one of the benefits of belonging to a martial arts community is we get to go in and try to strangle each other, but it's under certain constraints where it is socially acceptable and it's beneficial to both of us. And we get to express that kind of violent urge that we might naturally have in a productive way.
Right. Well, so yeah. I mean, I think anyone that's been in the gym a while would agree that they have a hard time picturing a highly trained person using that kind of violence. Like, you know what I mean? Like a really accomplished MMA fighter beating
So why do you think
someone
that
up.
is, Dan? Why?
I think because they're familiar with it and they're like, this is not right or fair for me to do to somebody that, or you know what I mean?
And
like
don't you think they've also kind of scratched that itch of expressing violence? Like they've done it. They've hit people in the gym, and you know what I mean?
I
They've
think
kind
so,
of
yeah.
exercised
Yeah.
that demon a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody's different. I think there's probably some people that they're never going to be
I
full.
saw someone from the gym post on, so there was some kind of thing along these lines about how like MMA fighters are good guys or something, and some Facebook comment where they were like, it was like, look, there's plenty of like douchebags that are like black belts
Yeah,
or
there's
like, you know
plenty
what I
of
mean? It's not-
sociopath. I
yeah,
think
like, it's so it's not.
Right.
I'm not like
no. I think the personality
cl-
makeup
but-
of people who do MMA, for example, probably is not that much different than the general population. You know what I mean? You probably have the same percentage of psychopaths and sociopaths that you have in the general population.
someone will be
right?
rotten, but I think in general you have a lot less violence. You have a lot less
I think you might have less violence
outside of the gym, obviously.
exactly, because
Right.
they're getting to express it in the gym.
Right.
And if they didn't, yeah. So I think if I see these people hitting people in these protests, I bet if they trained a little bit, even jiu-jitsu, where you're not striking each other, they would feel less of a need to try to express that out there.
Right. And they can be less scared. And the other thing too, like the violence is real to them, right? So they're less likely, things that they'd never trained in the gym, I think they'd still be less likely to pick up a brick and throw it at a crowd. Like you're like, wait, this brick would really hurt someone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, whereas I think it's still more
right. If you've ever been
to someone
knocked
that's
out
never-
in the
yeah,
gym,
right.
or even really stunned, you realize like, yeah, that's not cool to get my bell rung, to really get hit in the head hard.
Yeah, or like, you know what it feels like to have a fist hitting you. You're like, I can't have a brick hitting somebody.
No.
Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it's far too dangerous.
whereas it's more like a fantasy encounter for people that have
Mm.
never done it at all. They're like, I'm throwing this brick, I'm swinging this sign, and like they
yeah,
sort of,
they're not as tuned into the actual consequences of that action, right?
that's what I think.
Yeah, they're like a little kid. Little kids are like that. Little
Yeah.
kids will throw a brick at you,
Yeah.
and you're like, yeah, that's that's not cool. But they don't really know what the consequences are going to be.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
We have a family, like when I was a little kid, my younger brother, we had of all things a xylophone. Like you think like
Which one is a xylophone? That's
like the ding ding ding, but it was made of metal.
yeah. That
So
you
kids
can
also
hurt
kids
somebody with a xylophone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I can see where this is going.
But so yeah, you could first of all really hurt some of the, but it was a metal xylophone. Somehow he got like, there was like a
How
bar-
old is he?
I don't know, like 3 or 4.
3 or 4. Okay.
We were little kids.
Okay.
And I was like 5.
You're 5. All right.
And there's a family story of me coming running through the house, like, help, you know, and he had somehow gotten a metal bar, like that had been some kind of brace off the back of the xylophone. And he had somehow gotten it, and he was mad at me about something, and he was going to brain me with a metal bar of the xylophone. So it's sort of like, first of all, to your point, yeah, little kids, to them, he's not picturing what the consequences of beating me with a metal bar. And then secondly, how creative the kids are. Like, how'd you find this weapon? Like, they keep try to keep.
Dan, that
safe
story
and
would have been
find-
better if he hit you with the xylophone itself,
Yeah,
and,
I know.
and it
Yeah, I
made
know.
some
I heard
musical
you.
sound as you got beaten.
Ding. Dring. Yeah, but no, he didn't get me, and he didn't hit me, and it wasn't. at all.
Yeah, he didn't. They have like little drumsticks with balls on them, right? Where you hit the xylophone.
Yeah, but it wasn't that.
That
It was
wasn't sturdy enough. He's
No,
like,
no, no.
this isn't
Yeah.
going to do enough damage. He knew I'm going to.
Well, he's younger than me too, so he needed something formidable. Like, I probably
Had he had
could've-
any experience in the prison population prior to this?
prior to 3. I don't remember.
Then he
When
came
he
out
first-
with a shiv
Yeah.
the next year.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, he again, he had no idea, and I think these protesters are sort of like that. Like, they're like, I'm just.
I think they're
I mean,
less
not-
experienced in
They're not a
violence.
4-year-old, but they're like, at the same time,
Yeah.
they're like, I'm just swinging this sign. Like, they're not like, this sign's really gonna. If I connect with this, I could break his skull.
Somebody
like
could
it's sort of
die.
like,
Yeah, it's
someone-
dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I mean, there's been stories. There's plenty of stories where people get punched out on the street and get knocked unconscious, and in the fall,
Yeah.
their head hits the sidewalk and they die.
Yeah, a guy I knew in college that happened to. It wasn't like a friend, but I just knew him. He was
Guy
across
died
it.
that way.
Yeah, he got in a
Wow.
stupid drunken argument. Someone hit him, and he hit his head on the pavement.
Yeah, so your
And
head, your skull's falling 5 or
Yeah.
6 feet into the pavement. It's very
And then the kid
dangerous.
that hit him got a manslaughter charge. It was
Oh.
like some 18-year-old with a
That's a
manslaughter
terrible
charge.
story,
I
huh?
forgot he had to do a few years.
Oh,
So yeah, it's miserable. And I think you're less likely to do it again if you train. Not again. I'm sure there's people who train who get in fights, and like, I'm not
Right.
naive, but you're certainly less likely. And it's because it's real to you. I think even within the gym, have you seen this? Like, in stand up, like a real aggressive guy that comes in on day one, and they swing for the fences at your
They
face,
do.
and you're like, Jesus, dude. I just remember
I've
one,
had
swing, like, he came so close with this really hard hook, and it touched my nose, but like just barely touched it. And I just remember keeping that like stony face, but inside I was like, holy Christ,
right.
that hit me.
Break
That
your
would've-
jaw.
Yeah, that would have broke. Like, I was like, what are you doing here? Like, suddenly you have to like really pay attention.
That's
I
very
guess it's
true. The
not
new
real for them
guys
yet.
have a problem with that. They can't calibrate how hard they go. I remember a guy years ago. He was a good-sized guy, young, strong guy, and I was going to spar with him in kickboxing. And I said, just stay calm, dude. We're going to go nice and light. And I reached out my left fist to touch fist to say, now we're going to starting. As his glove was still touching my glove, he just kicked me as hard as he possibly could while our gloves are still touching. I mean, hard as he could. So I leg kicked him a few times after that, yeah.
Yeah. And then it becomes, we said before, you make people pay, but then you don't want to really do that either, because
That doesn't
then they're
really
like,
work
oh,
that
so
well.
that is how we're doing it. You know what I mean? They're like,
right.
because I've made that mistake too, where like someone's brand new and I'm like, all right, I'm going to make you pay and get rough. But then you're like, you're reinforcing it. You're like, all right,
You're
this is how we
reinforcing it.
roll.
That's funny, Dan. That was an old school sort of trope or method where if some guy was going too hard with the people that he was bigger and stronger and more
green
experienced
lighting.
with, green light him. So then they would send somebody in and smash that guy and rough him up. But obviously that doesn't work. It
Yeah.
does exactly
You see the
what you're
temptation
saying.
of it though. Like you see, like I do. You're sort of
Yeah.
like, yeah, that was good. He was rough.
You
on
think
this,
you're dishing
rough
out
on this
justice.
nice little guy, and so let's
Right.
get this tough guy to make it right. But then like we're saying, it doesn't work in the long run, right? 'Cause
Basically what you're teaching is if you can, you smash the guy and make him miserable. Yeah.
But the parallels happen to me in jiu-jitsu too, where a brand new person will just like get, they're used to a higher level guy getting out of everything. So they're trying to Kimura you or Americana you or armbar you. And they're like, they think, well, he's probably just going to get out. And so they just rip it with everything they have.
Yeah.
And I just, within the last couple of months, that happened where someone just was trying to armbar me and they actually had me.
Yep.
And he just ripped it, but like missed like his, he wasn't on my elbow. And I really felt like, man, if that was on my elbow, he would have just snapped my arm. So then you're like, well, now he's not ever getting that position again. Like I can't ever let him grab my arm
I did
again.
something very similar. Somebody was telling me, "Oh, you should let your students tap you occasionally," and because at that point I really hadn't been doing that, and I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. I want to be a good teacher." and I was teaching a private lesson to a guy who was a big, strong guy. He was a very young guy, but he was maybe 10 years younger than me or so. But he was like 6'3" or so and super fit, strong. And I was like, all right, I'll let him armbar me. And that happened, man. I let him have my arm. His eyes opened like saucers. Yeah. And he grabbed that arm, and he was just going to obliterate my arm. So at the last moment, I was able to just spin out of it. And then I realized, yeah, I'm never doing that again, letting somebody have my arm like that. Yeah.
You could have broken it, right? Yeah.
He would have destroyed my arm, Dad. Yeah. I mean, he was a rower in college, strong, super fit guy, and he was slamming his whole body into my arm. Yeah, he would have just destroyed it. Yeah. So I don't do that anymore.
Yeah. So it all comes back to this point of like people that are not familiar with violence, they're going to be more dangerous at it.
They are. They're not calibrated.
And again, I think sometimes it sounds like you're trying to say like some kind of smug, like look how bad they are at fighting, but it's not that.
No.
But it's very noticeable, I think. Like when you there was just that video went around of that fight at Disneyland.
That was crazy.
Yeah, but
how crazy was that?
Right, yeah, it's a madhouse. It was within a family, I think.
You know what blew my mind is like I thought if you did something like that at Disney, 20 muscle goons would descend on you
dressed
in about 30 seconds.
Characters.
Yeah, and just drag you out of there.
Just a bunch of goofies and Mickey Mouses.
That fight went on for like 10 minutes, didn't it?
Yeah, I know. But
did they ever arrest the guy?
I don't think so, because I think they were all within a family and they all didn't press charges. But again, they were big, strong guys involved. But I mean, again, I'm not trying to be smug, but like the fighting looked really,
yeah, all over the place.
Really, just they couldn't throw a punch at all, or like, do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like if I
there was the one guy that seemed to be the main aggressor, right? He was I couldn't tell, but he looked like a pretty big guy, right?
Yeah, it looked to me, but
he was smacking all these different women too. I didn't know what was going on.
It was a madhouse, but like you said, it looked, but you peek behind the curtain and you're like, wait, there is no security.
So weird. There was another incident. I saw a video in Las Vegas. They're having the World Series of Poker out there, and some guy, he must have some mental dysfunction, but he went all in. I think it cost like $10,000 to get into this tournament. He just shoved all in, all his chips, and then he drops his pants. He's standing there.
So he was all in.
He was all in all the way.
Yeah.
So some lady comes over with a clipboard. She's like, how dare you? Stop that. And he eventually pulled his shorts up, and then he lost, and then he walked away. And then they had another video. He's standing up in the middle of a craps table. You know what the craps table? Yeah. It's pretty big. It's got some high sides. He's standing in the middle of it and stomping around, and then he completely drops everything. So he's completely pantless, no underwear, nothing, and he's like yelling and stomping his feet. And it took a while for somebody to come over. Like some security guard comes over and kind of mildly is talking to him, and finally it looked like a police officer came in. He had like a bright yellow shirt. Right. I thought somebody said he was a bicycle cop, and he just goes, "Get over here," and pulls him down. But
especially a casino, you'd think it's like
I thought, I don't know if it's from watching those movies, the movie Casino, where they're going to cattle prod you, drag you out back, and break your thumbs. But I don't think it works that way anymore.
I think a lot of that, looking behind you always think there's more order. Like I think there's major stores that are like, if you steal, we just let you go.
Right.
And stuff like that, like, and you're like, well, really? Or like that was when I went from college to graduate school, and I went to the other side where I was like with the professor, like proctoring exams. And I didn't realize like all the time professors are catching kids cheating and being like, screw it. Like they don't
let it slide.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to deal with this.
Aggravation.
You know what I mean? They're like, yeah, I don't need that. Like, especially if it's little, like I'm just going to take a peek at the other paper. And they're like, yeah, I saw him, but I can't prove it, and I can't. Like they're like, I don't. Yeah. And what do I care?
Yeah.
I'm not even that way, by the way. I would bust people because I've like this overinflated sense of justice or something. Where I'd be like,
really?
Yeah, I'd just be like, no, you can't just cheat. Yeah. Also, I'm mad. I'm like, oh, so I could have cheated this whole time if I knew you were just going to let it go.
I didn't know you could cheat either. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure it depends. I'm sure there's professors who don't. I'm sure there's many college professors listening to this podcast who are like, no, I don't let it go. Oh yeah. But I know there's others that for sure were like, I don't want to to deal with this. You know, like I don't, you know, so what? So they copied a couple answers. Because I went to the professor. I was like, that guy's cheating right there. He's looking right directly at the paper. And he was like, yeah, leave it. I was like, seriously?
What was the class?
I think it was a psychology class.
He's like, yeah, this is all nonsense anyways.
Yeah. Who cares? I had one, too, where I caught a guy like, oh, wait, this was, did I ever tell you this? Like, I was in my office, like a grad student office, like so in the academic building.
Okay, and you're a teaching assistant
Yes.
or something? Yeah.
And I'm in an office. So late at night, some 2 students show up, and they're like, we're looking for, it's like my office mate, like another grad student I shared the office with. And they're like, we have questions about tomorrow's exam. And they look just kind of squirrely, but I was busy. So I'm like, yeah, well, he's not here. You know, yeah. And they're like, can you help me? I'm like, no, I can't. Like, I'm not in this class. Like, go. So that was back in the days, like the printer, there was like a printer downstairs. Like there wasn't even a printer in my office. I had to print something downstairs and go get it.
Send it to the network and it print it out downstairs.
Yeah. So printed downstairs. So I go downstairs to get my printout. And now it's like 9:30 at night, something like that. I come back upstairs and one of the kids is being a lookout, but on the other end of the hall, like we're not the hall where I'm coming from. And the kid who had just been talking to me has got a screwdriver under my doorknob and is like prying the door.
So you went downstairs to the printer.
Yeah.
And when you came back upstairs, they're
this
trying
is
to
going
break
on.
into your office.
They're breaking into the office with a screwdriver. So I
This
round
is
the
Animal
bend
House?
and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, and they see me and they just run. But I'm like, you idiots, you were just talking to me. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, also, even if like, say I had left for the night, I would have been like, well, I know who did it. It was the guys who just were talking to me 5 minutes before. Like, because they were
Criminal
in at 9 o'clock at
geniuses.
night, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm like, so a couple things. One is I called campus security and I'm like, well, this is what happened. I saw these kids breaking in and I'm like, you can see like all the screwdriver marks and the things, the locks half popped out. So again, you go behind the curtain though. And so this campus security like knocks it back into place and he goes, it's all right now. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not what I'm talking about though. I mean, the kid was trying to, and he's like, well, what are you going to do? Like he wanted no part of it, you know, he wanted to, so I'm like, fine. But again, I had this even younger, I think it was more, I had this inflated sense of justice. So I went to the professor and I said, hey, you know, I can find this kid. He's got to be he's in the test today, right?
Yeah.
Like, and if he's not, I'll talk to the 2 kids that aren't
Yeah.
here. So the first thing I did, I think I recognize, I see the kid, and I walk right up.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry, Dan. So you said that to the professor, and what was his response?
This is the next day. He was like, kind of lukewarm on it, but he was like, all right. Yeah, all right. If you want.
So it's like a big lineup for
let's
you.
bust him. Yeah.
You're going to sit there and
Yeah,
go.
he goes, yeah.
Were you behind a two-way mirror?
I was I just walked through the test itself.
Okay.
So there's this kid like getting ready for this big exam.
Yep.
And I walk up and I'm like, I confront him, you know, I'm like, well, you know, breaking into my office, blah, blah, blah. And like halfway through accusing him, I realize it's not him. Like he's looking at me. I accuse the wrong kid. I walk right up and I'm like, well, would you think that's smart to break into my office and steal that? And he's looking at me bewildered and I'm like, never mind. You know, he's like, what was that? You know, like, so then I keep walking and then I see the kid. It was like, he's got his hat down over his eyes. He's like trembling. And I'm like, okay, got him. So I go to the professor and I'm like, yeah, it's that kid right there with the hat. Like, and I think that, you know, so the professor's like, oh yeah, I know him. So he walks he's like, come with me. He walks up to the kid.
Says come with me to who? You?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he walks over to the kid and goes, like, whatever the kid's name is, I don't remember. But he's like, Brian, he's like, I think Dan here would like to have a word with you out in the hall. And I'm like, what? Like, what? That's your, like, that, like, no, I meant you do something. You're the professor. And he's like, I think you two need to have this out. And you need to have a talk. And I'm like, what? So he just sent us both out in the hallway, you know, and I'm like, I'm going to get in a fight now. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, the professor just sent the 2 of us out.
Weird.
To talk, and I'm like, so then I'm like, the guy's like, what? I didn't do anything, you know? And I'm like, oh. So I'm like, look, I saw you do this. I saw you with the screwdriver. I saw everything. And I thought it was getting heated. And then he just burst into tears. He just started crying.
Interesting.
And it was really awkward for me at that. Like, I was more comfortable when I thought it was going to be violent. You know, he's just like, he's crying and saying about his family. And I'm like, all right, like settle down, like like all right, whatever, like okay. I just felt so awkward.
Do you know that's a strategy? I've heard this described in evolutionary psychology. When an adult cries, they're trying to prompt a parent-child dynamic between the two people who are having some conflict.
That makes sense. Maybe a grown man.
Yeah, grown women do it too. Yeah.
And so yeah, I guess.
So you started feeling like a parent.
Maybe it worked. I think
Apparently it worked.
I was because I actually think it worked because when he was confronting me, you feel a little bit like you have to stick your chest, get back at him, and like you're getting angry and kind of getting your adrenaline going. Then when he started crying, I was like, all right, settle down, no big deal. I'm sure it'll be fine, or whatever. Like, so I guess it did work, like you're saying.
Yeah.
But I also also the advice for people listening, maybe in one of these confrontations, just burst into tears.
Start crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna store that one.
Forget about learning jiu-jitsu. Just cry.
But the whole reason I'm bringing it up is that, like, so then I'm like, well, go back to the professor, like, well, he admitted everything. He tried to pop the lock off. He's tried to steal he wanted to get in and try to steal the exam.
Yeah.
Like look for a copy of it, I guess. And I'm like, he just admitted everything. And the professor's like, oh yeah.
Glad we got that behind us.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, well, now that's done. And I'm like, so are you going to do anything? And so this is a guy not just like peeking at a paper. This is like popping a lock off an office.
Breaking and entering.
Breaking and entering. Yeah. And he's like, oh, like he just didn't want to deal with it. And he never dealt with it. He never did anything. So like even that, he never did anything. So as far as like Disneyland, like no security guards coming out, I think this whole, I can't.
Security guards don't get paid enough anyway.
Security guards are practically told not to touch anyone, and then even if someone's breaking and entering, no one does anything. And then at the police officers, it's hard now too. They're not necessarily supported. If they don't have a district attorney supporting them. Then they're not going to bother, right? They're like, I'm not going to pull someone in for something that I know they're going to drop all the charges.
I think there's a theory that in some jurisdictions, people are sticking their neck out less and less. So what happens is there's just less policing getting done.
Wouldn't Boston be one of those jurisdictions?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
I think they have a non-supportive DA. Although we don't get into politics.
We don't get into politics, Dan. All right, Dan. I think we've gone over our time slightly. Yeah, flew by. So let's summarize. I can't even remember what the hell we talked about. But one of the things we talked about is, and we're not condoning this, but we think people have a natural tendency toward violence in some situations. And if you train in jiu-jitsu or kickboxing, Muay Thai kickboxing or something, maybe you can express that violence in socially acceptable, but I also think it's a beneficial, productive way because I'm challenging myself, I'm getting fit. I'm learning to navigate conflict when I'm training jiu-jitsu with you.
Right.
So I think, and if you don't, you may end up being a soccer hooligan or some kind of wacky protester hitting people over the head.
And if you're a nonviolent person, maybe it's just sort of within you, eating you up in some other way.
That's another good point. Yeah, where you're not even expressing it, but it's still bothering you. So I got to think that's a big part of why people do come in, is they feel the seed of that violence in them, and they want to figure it out. They want to either express it or get a hold of it. And I think so. I think that's probably the reason why they come in, because it is hard. Jiu-jitsu especially, or all of it, if you're training live, it's not an easy path. It's hard work, and there's a certain amount of pain involved and discomfort. And that usually means people aren't going to do it, but we seem to get people doing it, so they're getting something out of it, right? Okay, anything else to add, Dan?
Nothing.
Awesome. You were brilliant once again. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast. Please share it, rate, and review it. We got a lot of reviews now. I don't know how many we have, but I think we got another one.
They lean towards good.
All 5-star reviews. We're
Right.
basically the Four Seasons of podcasts.
Right. And so if you're one of the people who hasn't dropped one of those reviews, what's going on?
What's your problem, man? I might have to express some violence. And we have some small T-shirts, the yellow
As
Part
all
of the
that's left
tribe.
is small.
and XL. I think we got XL and small left. So
All
if you
right.
want a shirt, reach out to me. I'll gladly get a shirt to you. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.